You're listening to a 58 Ember production.
GIRLSCAMP, it's Girls Camp.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Girls Camp podcast. I'm your host, Haley Rawl, and if you are navigating a faith deconstruction too, or simply fascinated by faith deconstruction journeys, by Mormonism specifically, and religion generally, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Today we are doing a campfire chat episode, which if you're new around here, we usually do this for the first episode of the month. It's where I take your submissions. They can be really about anything, questions, needs for advice, thoughts you're having, and we just talk through them all. It's kind of like life updates, swapping thoughts and feelings and questions. And because last week's episode was with the amazing Heather Gay, and it was timely because of her book being released, we're doing a campfire chat for the second Wednesday in December. I just finished looking through the thoughts, feelings, questions. We've got a lot of good ground to cover today. And I also am going to take a little time off the top to talk about my most recent kind of big life update. Big. They're not that big, but the update is big, which is that I got a breast augmentation. I got a boob job. And I've talked about this at length on the Patreon, but it was before I actually got the implants in, and now I have them in, and there's been some more reactions because I posted a reel about it. I just have a little bit more to say. So we are going to talk about that right off the top and then dig into all of the other questions. Talking about the boobs. There's a lot of backstory, and I did a whole Patreon episode on this because I didn't want the Girls Camp podcast to be entirely taken over by boob talk. So if you want the very, very in-depth, all of it about the breast augmentation decision, I will link the Patreon episode. You can go listen to that. But in a nutshell, I had been considering getting a breast augmentation for a long time, about 2 years in earnest. I did a ton of research and found a doctor and saved up money, and I just got it done. And I am incredibly ecstatic, to be honest, about the results. Sizing was a tricky thing for me to figure out, and I wanted to get an augmentation that just suited my frame. I didn't want to get really big boobs for me personally for multiple reasons, and I just feel very pleased with how everything turned out. And I'm trying to think the best entry point to talk about this. Let me actually just read something that someone wrote in for this week's campfire chat about the boob job, because I posted a reel about this on Instagram, and there's been some really interesting discussion in the comment section, as you can imagine, about breast augmentations, about plastic surgery generally, but I would say more specifically about the boobs part of it, because when you're talking about plastic surgery that has to do with boob size, something that comes up is the topic of gender-affirming care. I did not realize before researching in preparation to get my breast augmentation that breast augmentations for cisgender people are also considered gender-affirming care. And there's actually a ton of gender-affirming care that cisgender people partake in. And there's lots of different ways you can look at this. There's lots of really interesting literature on this. I'll link resources. I've already linked some stuff on Instagram, but I'll link it in the show notes. When I first heard that getting a breast augmentation could be gender-affirming care as a cisgender woman, I felt hesitant to accept that, not because I'm against gender-affirming care, more so because I think gender-affirming care is so important for transgender folks that I didn't want to be like, yeah, this boob job is also gender-affirming care. Like, I didn't want to dilute the importance of gender-affirming care for transgender people. But the more research I've done and conversations I've had, the more I've realized that acknowledging that cisgender people also participate in gender-affirming care is actually really important, because it emphasizes how crucial gender-affirming care is. And it also goes to show that we all, in some types of ways, participate in gender affirming care. And it just goes to show how ludicrous it is that people want to deny gender affirming care for transgender people because we all participate in gender affirming care. There's so many ways that we choose to represent externally our gender, how we feel on the inside. And obviously, gender is also not a binary, so there's all sorts of fluidity and all of this, and it's a really big conversation. I really want to get someone on the podcast. You can tell that I so badly want to talk about this. You can tell that I feel not even nervous. I don't want to do a disservice of saying something incorrect, and I still have a lot of research and a lot of educating for myself to do around all of this. So I'd love to get an expert on to help guide all of us through that. But what I wanted to talk about specifically, because someone wrote in this thing to the campfire chat today, is boob jobs as gender affirming care for cisgendered women. Because someone said, equating womanhood with having large breasts is a red flag. It is triggering to hear you say that your breast augmentation makes you more feminine. I have been very careful. I've tried to be very careful as I've discussed my decision to get a breast augmentation, to emphasize that there is no correlation in my mind between femininity and the size of someone's breasts. And I am saying that with my whole chest, with my whole augmented chest. I mean that. I genuinely don't think that womanhood equates to breast size. I think that that's absurd. And I think that that's incredibly reductive. And I would like to think that probably nobody thinks that. However, I am a cisgender woman and I live in my body. And for me personally, the decision to get a breast augmentation, because I had lost a lot of the breast tissue that I had previously, the decision to get a breast augmentation was very much rooted in wanting to feel more feminine in my own body. It was a personal choice for me based on how I want to externally express my femininity, how I feel most feminine. And that doesn't mean that I have any sort of metric for someone else's femininity and their breast size. What I'm trying to say is it's a personal thing. And I can understand how at face value, if you hear someone say, oh, I got a breast augmentation to feel more feminine, that could potentially be triggering for you. But I would invite anybody listening on any topic, honestly, to consider that a lot of this is very personal for people, and gender is very personal, and our bodies are very personal, and what we do with them is very personal. And I also think that there is something to be said about, yes, I'm a person who has a platform and I'm talking about a decision that I made for my body. So that could be viewed as advocating for something, or as me saying this is the right thing to do to be feminine, or the right thing to do to embrace your femininity or your womanhood or whatever. And I really do my best at every turn to reiterate again and again that I am making decisions for me because I know myself and I have autonomy and I have bodily autonomy. And if you feel triggered by someone wanting to get a breast augmentation because that person wants to feel more feminine, I would invite you to reflect on your own self instead of, I guess I'm saying that if that feels triggering to you, I don't think that that actually has anything to do with me, because my decision about my own femininity and how it relates to my body is about me. It's not about you, whoever you are. And also at the same time, I was also just trying to explain this to Bentley. I was saying it's really interesting to have gotten a breast augmentation because I don't feel like I align with saying plastic surgery is great. Anyone who wants to get it, anyone who feels like it would help their confidence, you should do it. It's 100% the best thing ever. I don't feel that way. I also don't feel like plastic surgery is evil and bad and it's always wrong. I feel very much somewhere in the middle. And I think it's an incredibly nuanced conversation. And nuanced conversations can be difficult to have when people are unwilling to engage in the nuance and when people are unwilling to also agree to disagree to a certain extent. And I knew this would all happen, and it's fine. And for the most part, it's just been actually really, really cool to open up this conversation and to be talking to people about plastic surgery, about boob jobs specifically. I just feel like I've already learned a lot from other people. I've learned a lot about myself. It's been, like I said, this really powerful gateway into learning more about gender affirming care for transgender folks. And I'm glad I'm talking about it. But what frustrates me so deeply is when people are willingly obtuse. And some people are. A lot of people are on the internet. I'm not saying this person specifically who wrote in is, but I am saying that it's so easy to reduce these gigantic concepts of things like gender, for example. It's very easy to reduce those things into binaries and into right and wrong and black and white. And we all have the tendency to do that. I have the tendency to do that. And I'm doing my best to not do that. And me making this decision for my own body has really pushed me into what I think is more nuanced thinking. And I talked about this in my Patreon episode, but I used to be, not long ago, I used to be incredibly judgmental of people who got plastic surgery, of people who got rhinoplasties, nose jobs, of boob jobs even. I was judgmental, and I was thinking a lot of these same things that are now being said to me about femininity is not about cup size, or you're just appealing to the male gaze, or all the things that one can be told when they get plastic surgery done. And then having gone through this experience myself and having thought about it on so many levels, I'm trying to imagine that other people are also thinking carefully about the decisions that they're making about their own bodies, and also remembering that ultimately it's my job to protect my own peace. And if people are doing things that I find triggering or that bring up insecurities for me, that is not their job to protect my insecurities or my triggers. And maybe that gets a little complicated if they're just being like objectively bad or like promoting bad messaging. But I think most of you will understand what I'm saying, and I appreciate you letting me rant about this. I appreciate you letting me make a decision that I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions on, and to kind of think through it and talk through it publicly. I actually feel like that is one of the core missions for me of Girls Camp, is being able to talk about things like this and not reducing it to, hey, I decided to do this with my body, so fuck off and don't say anything. Yeah, I kind of feel that to an extent, but I also understand this is going to bring up conversations for people. This is part of what we do at Girls Camp. We talk about these things, and I'm willing to talk about it, and I'm willing to engage even with pushback or with people who have questions about it. But I just would love if that could happen from a place of hoping to understand, and also from a place, again, of just understanding that there are boundaries, and that ultimately what I do with my body is not your choice. Now I'm kind of just talking in circles, so I'm just going to stop right there with that one. But I do want to read one more submission that someone wrote in, the breast augmentation. Someone said, seeing your augmentation journey and hearing your perspective and experience has made me feel so much more comfortable and excited for my own journey of getting a breast reduction. It's not always about the men, it's about me, and that's a breakthrough in the patriarchy. I love that. I've talked with a lot of people since getting my augmentation who are hoping to get reductions. And it's really interesting because you would think it might be the complete opposite thing, but a lot of times similar feelings come up around, should I just find a way to just be happy with my natural body? Is this me giving into beauty standards, male gaze, all of the things. And I really appreciated that comment because the size that I chose to implant is, I would say, a pretty modest size for an augmentation. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's what I chose to do. And so a lot of the comments that I've been getting is, well, they still look small. And those comments are mostly from men, which I'm sure nobody is surprised by. And that actually makes me so fucking happy because I did not do a breast augmentation. I did not get these implants for men. I did not get them because I wanted approval from men and I wanted men to view my body a certain way, truly. And yes, I don't exist in a vacuum. So as much as I can say that, I really do think that, but I also live in society. I mean, I'm sure there's some of that has to leak in, I think, inevitably. Maybe not. Maybe some people have transcended that. But the point I'm making is that I didn't want to get boobs because I wanted to please the men that I am mingling with all day. That's the last thing that was a consideration for me. And it really did feel like something that I wanted to do for myself. And it's an interesting thing because you could argue modesty. I've thought about this a lot with modesty because I talk a lot about modesty and how women should be able to dress however they want. And for me, I tend to like to show some leg. I tend to like to show some shoulder. And people will push back and say, well, actually, you are just doing what men want you to do. You think that you're being a feminist by wearing a mini skirt and a tank top, but men actually want women to wear mini skirts and tank tops. Have you ever stopped to consider that I don't give a flying fuck what men want? That is what I want to say about the boobs, about the modesty, about so many things. And I get so fired up about this because why do men think that everything anyone does is about them? It is not about them. The decision to wear what I want to wear, to get breast implants, if I want to get breast implants, does not revolve around men. And I think that both men and women have a really hard time wrapping their heads around that. And I do too. I am still deep in the work of decentering men, of decentering the patriarchy. It'll be a lifelong journey. And this is not me saying that I hate men. I don't hate men at all. I'm just saying that my life decisions don't center around what men want. And so even if someone says to me, well, men want you to wear a miniskirt, I don't care. That's the whole point, is that I don't care. I don't care if they want me to or they don't want me to. I just don't care what men want. I'm going to take a sip of my soda and take a little breather. Okay, we're back. I had a feeling when I was sitting down today after reading hundreds of comments about my boobs from men that things might get a little bit heated, but getting heated is not a bad thing. And I know that many of you listening are in this same boat and many men listening are in this same boat. And there is just a lot to parse out, especially around patriarchy and the male gaze. And it's just something always on my mind, and boobs just play right into that conversation in such a massive way. So thanks again for letting me work through and unpack some of that as well. Also, I'm just going to really quickly rattle off some logistical questions people have asked me about the boobs. I went to Dr. Angela Keene. Loved her. Love that she's a woman. She's a Never Mormon, which is actually really interesting. A Never Mormon in Utah doing plastic surgery. I just had a lot of fun talking to her. She's just a really cool person. I had a great experience with her. Sizing, I did 240 cc's moderate profile. There's a lot more I could say about sizing. I'll probably do like TikTok videos or something on it. But just as far as those basic questions, there's the answers for you. Moving on from boobs. Someone asks, can Mormon criminals wear garments in jail/prison? What a fascinating question. I had never considered this, My gut told me that they would be allowed to, but then Google was mostly inconclusive, although I did find one article that said no, that Mormons cannot wear garments in jail, which actually makes sense because I know that it's just very strict what you're allowed to wear. I thought that there could have been like prison issued garments because I know that that's a thing for the military, but also if you're in prison, maybe not always, but if you're in prison or jail as a Mormon, it's probably pretty likely you're excommunicated, which would mean you shouldn't be wearing your garments anyway. So I don't think so. But if anyone has personal experience and wants to chime in, let me know. What an interesting question. Next question. How do you feel about calling it the church? I can't stop, but I feel like it gives it too much power. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. So they're talking about the fact that and I think many other ex-Mormons, as well as Mormons, refer to the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as the church. And I agree. It bothers me that I do it because it is not the church. Never has been, never will be. In fact, it's one of the newest and latest of churches. So to call it the church is particularly ironic. I think I do it because in the circles that I'm in, talking about it on the podcast, we're oftentimes talking about the Mormon church and it's just the easiest shorthand to call it the church. But I do try to say the Mormon church, again, for that same reason. I just don't think it deserves to be the church. I also think I sometimes use that language because when I say the church, I'm also sometimes just referring to like beyond Mormonism and just Christianity more generally, like the church as the symbol for religion, Western Christian religion. So there's a lot of different ways that language can work and can be used, but I do think that it shows the naivete sometimes, or just it can be a small-minded thing to just say the church, the church, the church when people are like, what church are you talking about? But for us Mormons, born and bred, the Mormon church was always just the church. As an ex-Mormon of almost 7 years, I still struggle so deeply with the Mormons that live in this arbitrary gray area where they drink coffee, get tattoos, don't wear garments, yet go to church every Sunday, post scriptures on social media, and outwardly support the church. As a coffee-drinking, tattooed ex-Mormon, why do they bother me more than the fully obedient members? Shouldn't I be excited at some rebellion from within? But alas, I am not. Like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You don't get to demonize me for not being a member, yet participate in all the things that should preclude you from membership, or at least a temple recommend. Help, LOL. I feel that big time. I think that came up in a huge way for a lot of us when The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives aired. Just that question of, okay, you are calling yourself a Mormon, but are you really? And it is interesting to think about why that might be more upsetting in some ways. I think your feelings are completely valid. I feel similarly oftentimes. The thing that I tell myself, though, is number one, hopefully, if people are being more lax members of the Mormon church when it comes to drinking coffee and getting tattoos, I would like to think that makes them more lax as well when it comes to things like how the church views LGBTQ plus individuals. I'd like to think that laxness within the Mormon framework is a good thing, regardless, irregardless. That's a tricky one that I always get confused, regardless or irregardless. What I'm trying to say is hopefully that laxness makes them safer people as church members and is a slow beginning towards things loosening up, which I think would be a great thing. The other thing I think about around this is just, going back to even that black and white thinking I was talking about before. I just find myself doing that as an ex-Mormon. And I think it's a human thing to do. I think it's also just a Mormon condition thing that bleeds over into ex-Mormonism, where we just want things to be black and white. And it's easier to make sense of people who are just fully in the church doing it all the exact way, or people who are fully out. And everyone in some way is on a spectrum, myself included. Like I'm not the most ex-Mormon there is. Might surprise some people, but I'm not, and I don't need to be. And I want to have the freedom of not having to fit in an exact box. And so even though I do think Mormonism is problematic and all the things, I'm trying my best to extend that to other people as well. But all that to say, yes, I do find it also annoying and frustrating. And I think it makes a lot of sense and is very valid that you would feel that way. Next write-in. I'm trying to work through some nihilism, but it's feeling pretty bleak. Did you go through a period of this post-Mormonism, and how did you cope? I'm going to give us a quick little definition of nihilism, just in case you don't know. Nihilism definition. Okay. Nihilism is a philosophical belief that centers on the idea that life lacks inherent meaning, value, or purpose. It often rejects traditional structures, moral principles, and religious beliefs, asserting that such constructs are baseless and subjective. Okay, so there's also a lot of different types of nihilism. Usually when I'm talking about nihilism, I'm not necessarily talking about that life has no purpose or meaning, but I guess kind of. More so, I think, talking about the fact that everything that you once believed about life's purpose and meaning and the afterlife is now gone. And so it's just this kind of big black void. Have I struggled with it? Yes, I have. In a very, very significant, life-altering way. And the thing is with facing nihilism is it's just kind of the biggest buzzkill of all time. And so it's not something that I want to dwell in or like talk about all that much, because I don't know, sitting around and talking about how you feel like life might not have any meaning or grand purpose is not very warm and fuzzy, and it's just a hard thing to talk about. My dad died last December, and his death anniversary date just happened. It was December 3rd. So it has been a year since he died. And on the anniversary of his death, I was reflecting on the fact that my brain and my soul and my body were so significantly altered by his death. And I knew that because I had experienced it, but being able to reflect back on it and look at, my year of life since he died was really crazy, just to think about how much has changed for me and my outlook on life and death. And it has been really bleak. At certain moments, it has been incredibly bleak. And there have been nights where I lay in bed and Bentley falls asleep and I'm alone in bed, and it just feels like an absolute crushing existential weight that is going to obliterate me. That's how bleak it has felt. However, for me, it has gotten better. I have found some resources. I think finding people who are talking about it is really huge because, as I said, it's stigmatized, it's taboo. You feel like you don't want to talk about it because you feel like it's wrong. Like it feels like really shameful. At least it has for me. Even amongst ex-Mormons, a lot of times I feel a lot of shame in admitting the depths of the nihilism that I've wrestled with. And I think finding people who are willing to talk about it is really useful. I always recommend Britt Hartley from No Nonsense Spirituality. There's a Mormon Stories episode that she went on that was really, really huge for me, hearing her just speak really vulnerably to how bleak it got for her. I think where I'm at now is it still comes and goes. I'll still have waves of it where I'll feel it either, a couple days where it's kind of present or just like a big wave kind of out of nowhere. But I feel like I have looked it in the eye as best as I can. And I know I will have to continue doing that as long as I am alive. But I'm proud of looking it in the eye and not turning away. And it has given me a lot of gifts as far as my perspective on life, just the cheesy shit that everyone says. And I think I'm slowly reconstructing meaning and purpose. And I'm slowly figuring out what I think about what happens after this, and I'm pulling together these little glimmers and shreds of hope. And I just am saying that for me, it has gotten better, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And that light at the end of the tunnel is not discovering some new magic meaning. At least it hasn't been for me. But it's finding hope that I can sit with this uncertainty and be okay, and that I can also begin to pull some new things together that are starting to fill in that space. And I didn't plan on doing this episode, but here goes nothing. I don't know exactly when or how, and, we'll see. But I am hoping either slowly or maybe it'll be a quick pivot to start focusing Girls Camp, the podcast, a lot more on that reconstruction and a lot less on deconstructing the Mormonism and the Christianity, and a lot more on what's next and how we then fill that void and bridge those gaps. And so I've just been doing a lot of thought on that myself and kind of ideating what that might look like as far as the podcast goes too. So there's a little teaser for that as far as kind of what I'm looking forward to for the future of Girls Camp. I'm still, like I said, fine-tuning some things. We'll see when it feels right to make that shift. I do think that shift is an important one to make, and so I'm going to make it in terms of this podcast as well. Next question. Can we talk about the ballroom dancing trend in Utah? As a never Mormon, what is the culture like, and why is almost every Dancing with the Stars pro Mormon or ex-Mormon? Dancing with the Stars is having its day in the sun. Maybe, I know a lot of people watch Dancing with the Stars, always have. I watched it in high school and then just, didn't think that much about it. I think with Riley Arnold being on the cast, as of the past, is this her second time? She's new on the cast. I don't know what they're doing, but I just feel like they're doing something right, because I didn't watch this latest season, but I was following along on TikTok, and I think I'll probably watch next season because I kind of got caught up in all of it. I think they just did really good with casting in a big way. And anyway, yes, a lot of the Dancing with the Stars people are Mormon or ex-Mormon. Julianne Hough and Derek Hough, they grew up Mormon. Julianne Hough actually did an episode on Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. That's one of my favorite podcasts. And she talks a little bit about it. She's now a host. Derek is a judge, I think. Jenna Johnson went to my high school. Lindsay Arnold went to my high school. Whitney Carson went to a neighboring high school. Riley Arnold went to my high school. I think Ezra is his name, is ex-Mormon. Brandon Armstrong, I'm not sure what his religious beliefs are, but I know he's Mormon / ex-Mormon adjacent. I would love to interview anyone, if anyone has connections or anyone is listening from that world, because I think it is so fascinating. As far as the why, dance is huge here in Utah. Dance is just a really big thing. A lot of Mormons are really into dance. I'm just theorizing here, but I think it wouldn't be a stretch to imagine that it's because it's something that requires a lot of discipline. Mormons are really into performance arts. I think there's a lot of Mormons who do theater and things like that. And when you have a bunch of sober high school kids, they maybe have more discipline towards certain things like that. I also just think once, dance starts becoming a big thing, then more people start doing it, then there's better teachers, there's better resources for it. So I think it's just kind of spiraled into that. I do remember growing up in high school, it was always funny to me, even as a high schooler, because I played soccer and I used to roll up my shorts and roll up my sleeves, just probably because I wanted to show more leg, and also didn't want to get tan lines with my sleeves. And we always got in trouble. The soccer girls always got in trouble for doing that. And then we would always joke because the girls on dance company were dressed in these sexy uniforms and doing like very overtly sexual dancing, which rock on. I was just jealous. But it is kind of a funny thing because I do think dance can be very sexual. Ballroom dance particularly can be very sexual, and I think it's beautiful and amazing. I find zero problem with it. I just think the Mormon overlap can be a little ironic for that reason. A little fun fact about me, I'll try and pull up a picture, but when I was in middle school, I was on Dancing with the Student Council, which was an assembly that we did because I was a student council member, and they would pair the student council members with the ballroom dancers. And my ballroom dance partner, shout out Marquette, I should see what he's up to, but I think he was on So You Think You Can Dance. He's a really, really good, or he was, I don't know if he's dancing still, but he's like very much part of that world. So that's my small connection to the ballroom dance world of Utah. And yeah, I was friends with Lindsay in high school. Jenna, I didn't know as well, but all just seemed very lovely and very kind, and Lindsay's very lovely and kind, and I think it's badass. I think ballroom dance is so cool, and I think that the Mormon connections are just really funny and random. Like I said, I would love to talk to someone who's ex-Mormon in that space and get more of their thoughts on it. I left the church a couple of months ago. My parents told me just yesterday that they are following suit. However, they said they'll never be bitter about the church, and they left because of social issues and it being a high-demand religion. I'm oddly having such a hard time with it. They're so close yet so far. Maybe they're still afraid? ? This was an interesting one to read for me because I realized that one of my biggest insecurities talking about Mormonism as an ex-Mormon is not Mormons saying shut up about it, because duh, they're going to say that. It's the ex-Mormons who say, well, I was a part of the church for 20 years and I just moved on. Like, why are you all so up in arms about it or whatever? I just think that you feel sometimes shame around caring so much, around being so angry or so bitter or still having so much to say. And so I can totally imagine that if close loved ones of mine left the church but were like, oh, but it's fine, like I don't really care and it's not a big deal anyway, that would be really hard for me. You never know what their journey will bring. It very well could be that in a few weeks or a few years, some of that anger comes up for them. I know this isn't always true because not everyone's journey is the same, but I do think that there is a massive difference between leaving the church and really deconstructing. And I think that oftentimes as people get deeper into deconstruction, there is more bitterness and anger, but that might not be the case for your parents. And that would be hard. I would just find people who can validate your anger because it is valid, and maybe they won't be able to do that, which would be a bummer, but hopefully you can find people who can. Next, write in. My life goal is to attend General Conference stoned out of my mind. Tell me when, tell me where. Actually, I know where, because it'll be where it always is in Salt Lake City. But I would love to attend General Conference stoned out of my mind as well. General Conference is the twice yearly church headquarter meeting where the prophet and the apostles, in air quotes, give their speeches and their TED Talks. And being there stoned would be such a trip, an actual trip and a trip. I'm trying to think. I don't really get stoned in public. I almost always am at my own house or a friend's house, or maybe like an more like intimate party setting, just because for me, when I am stoned, I'm just cozy and just prefer that. But I could make an exception for general conference, and I would be very curious what that experience would be like as well. Recently, I have felt the urge to begin writing again. I used to write short stories in composition notebooks, and I have taken a few creative writing classes in high school and college. However, I have no degree and feel like sometimes my writing can lack flow and diversity. You've jumped into a career somewhat adjacent to your degree and have been successful. I wonder if you have advice for people who feel unqualified to follow their dreams. I have been feeling so passionate lately about creating. And I think it's because I had someone ask me on Instagram, okay, you don't believe in Mormonism. What do you believe? And it was a really lovely exercise for me to think about, what do I believe now? And there's so many things I believe. But one of the things that came up for me that I believe most strongly is how powerful it is to create, if even just for the sake of creating, and how easily that gets lost, and how much as adults we deprioritize creating just for the hell of it. And I actually went just today, my friend Bailey, she put on this market where she gathered a bunch of vendors, and it was like a Christmas market, and they had people who did ceramics and art and terrariums and things that were knit, and just so many vendors who had just these little businesses where they just create stuff. And it is so nourishing to the soul to not only create, but to partake in other people's creations. And obviously, with capitalism and Amazon and whatever, so much of our lives is you just go on the internet and buy the scarf you need on Amazon. And it's so soulless. And to have items that are made with so much soul and so much personality is just really, really huge. And on the creator side of it, speaking to this person's question, write. And it doesn't have to be good. Write in your composition notebook. And you said that you feel like your writing lacks flow and diversity. It doesn't matter. Just write because it feels good and because it will make you feel better. I'm going to read a Kurt Vonnegut quote. We love you, Kurt. What would a girls' camp episode be without a Kurt Vonnegut quote? Practice any art: music, singing, dancing, acting, drawing, painting, sculpting, poetry, fiction, essays, reportage, no matter how well or badly, not to get money and fame, but to experience becoming, to find out what's inside you, to make your soul grow. It's cheesy and it's corny, but it's very, very true. And I think that so many aspects of our society want us to not be doing that. And I think creating just for the sake of creating is such a good place to start. As far as answering your question about making a career out of it, it is tricky because I think so often the first inclination, I'm speaking to myself here, is to monetize. And it makes sense because you got to make a buck to live. And if you're spending time doing something, oftentimes you need to make money in order to justify the time spent. I will say around that one of the things about the day and age that we live in is that you do have access to putting out your art into the world in ways that I think are unprecedented. I bought a microphone and a mic stand. Bentley had a camera, and I got on the mic and I started talking and I edited it. I edited it and I started a podcast. And then I started an Instagram. And the actual startup cost of doing all of this was really low. The startup cost of doing a Substack is really low. Create a Substack. You're going to have to self-promote, and self-promotion is really hard and can be really uncomfortable and really vulnerable. But I guess what I'm saying is what's so beautiful is that you can put your art out into the world, and it's scary, and it's scary that you might fail. But if you never try, then you'll never know. What's the song? What's that song? Oh, Speed of Sound. Oh my gosh. Coldplay, of course. Where to? Where do I go? If you'll never try, then you'll never know. I love Coldplay. Anyway, yeah, I think that, it's kind of the dream is to do what you love and make money doing it. But then once you make money doing it, then it's like, then do you love it anymore? I personally feel honored and overjoyed that I get to do something I love and have found a way to monetize it. And I would just say you've just got to make the leap and try it and keep your job and then do your side thing until that's making more than your job, and then quit your other job. And it's going to be a hustle and a grind. But if your soul feels called to it, you'll feel very happy that you did it. Sorry, I hope I'm sounding more like Rick Rubin-esque than what's his bucket, Goggins. I just hate that shit when people are like, just do it, babe. You can do anything you put your mind to. I'm not trying to be that girl. Although I do kind of believe that. Just said in a little bit of a better way, hopefully. Next question. What's it like being a twin mom? Does any part of you wish you had them one at a time? I have always wanted to be a twin mom, to the point that I'm considering elective IVF to try and make it happen, LOL. Being a twin mom, I should do a whole episode on this because I could talk about it forever and ever and ever and ever. The pros are so huge and the cons are also very significant. And I also want to, of course, be careful about this because I feel so immensely blessed. I wouldn't have it any other way. I not only love my children each deeply individually, I love their twinhood. It is so special and so sacred to me. It's one of the most sacred things that I get to witness is them as twins and them being twins. But it's also incredibly hard and it can feel very, very isolating because I do think it's very different in very significant ways from mothering a singleton. And I do feel like I missed out on a lot of things by having twins, especially because I don't think I'm going to have any more kids. So twins is the only way that I know. I also really push back against the idealization of multiples that I think is especially present on the internet. And I lean into this sometimes too. I do my best not to. But when I see moms of multiples on the internet, and don't get me wrong, parents of multiples should get all the praise in the world because it's really, really hard. But I do feel like it's put on this pedestal of like this really magical, whimsical thing, which it is. But it's also so, so, so hard in a way that I wish people were more aware of. And also because I think that one of my biggest fears and my biggest guilt, even because I chose to implant 2 embryos, so I chose to have twins because I did do IVF, is that there are times when I feel like I can't give one of my children what they need because I have 2 of them in the exact same stage of life. And that is devastating as a mother. And it makes me feel guilt that I set myself up to maybe not be able to be everything for one child. And, when I think about that, I realize, well, I was a second child. I never had my parents' full undivided attention, but it is different with phases and everything. So that's my, in a nutshell, response to that. I'm going to make a note of that and talk about it more. I'll have people ask me who are about to do IVF, should we implant 2 embryos? Should we not? It's really such a hard decision because, like I said, there are so many beautiful, wonderful things about twins, and there are so many hard things about twins. And so it's really hard. I don't know. I'm in a particularly hard stage of motherhood right now with just emotions and lots of fighting, and it's all perfectly normal. And my girls are gorgeous and lovely and perfect. They're just toddlers. And having two really does exacerbate and magnify the hard stuff. So I don't know, but it's fucking cute. It's really the cutest, sweetest, most fun thing ever. So I don't really know. Okay, someone says, how many sets of garments does a Mormon own? I also thought that was an interesting question. I probably had 8 pairs of garments because you have tops and bottoms. Maybe 8. I don't know. I'm sure it's very different for every Mormon, how many you have or how many you don't. But you want to have at least enough that you can, like, at least a week's worth. Maybe I'm thinking maybe it was a lot more than 8. I would guess average 8 to 15 pairs. Let me know. What are some ways to access ethical porn? Great question. Porn has been completely, it's the thing now in Utah where you have to like put in your ID or whatever. I will always proselytize if you are an ethical porn girly, which you should be. I'm saying if you're a porn girly, if you are, it should be ethical anyway. I know some of y'all don't care about porn, but if you do, Beleza, which I have worked with Beleza. This is not sponsored, what I'm saying now, but I've worked with them before on their boutique side because they also do toys, which is great. But you do have to pay. It's quite cheap. I've paid. It's like, I want to say like $3 a month or something. And it's an ethical porn site. It's run by women for women. And so, yeah, that's my recommendation on that one. Next question. What do you think about the light the world giving machines? I feel like a lot of ex-Mormons rag on them, but I feel like even if it is a marketing ploy, at least they are doing something good, right? I don't know how I feel, but I'm open to any opinions, but especially yours. Yeah, I've had some self-awareness moments around the giving machines. For those who don't know, they've been doing this for a while, the church, but it's like these vending machines where you go and you pay for something and it's like a nonprofit of your choice. You can pay to, for example, I think a few years back at least, there was an option where you could pay for a goat and that goat would go to a farmer somewhere in some country that would help like build up their farm type vibe. And people have been talking about this because recently the Kansas City Chiefs football team, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, did an ad for the giving machines, which was odd. I do feel of two minds about it. I do want to give credit where credit is due, and I think it's great that there's an initiative to give back, and I think that making it accessible for people to give back is great. And I think having a way of centering the season around giving to people in need is also great. It is obviously a marketing ploy, so the church is benefiting from doing it. I wanted to do some research on this, and forgive me that I didn't find the time before I started recording, but I have heard that the church uses the money from the nonprofits as their own write-off. So like you go to the giving machine, you pay, you give the money to the nonprofit, and then they go use the money, but the church is able to also use it as a write-off, which that's not the worst thing in the world, but maybe not the best thing in the world either. I also just think, okay, you're paying Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs to do this huge ad campaign. It's tricky. And I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but I don't think that it's not without some ethical considerations. And I, for one, would rather be giving in different ways. But yeah, it's centered around giving, and that's great too. And I'm also trying not to be super jaded and just, well, the church is doing it, so it's dumb, because I think there's a lot of great things about it as well. So I tend to agree with you that it's probably kind of complicated, but maybe I'm missing something. I should do some more research because maybe I'm missing some big ethical problem with it all. I don't doubt that there could be. It seems like it's maybe a bit of a gray area. Let me know. Okay, I'm going to end on this submission. I've listened to your podcast a lot this last year, and it has helped me so much on my deconstruction journey. Thank you. I love how you respect your family and where they are at. I used to be the sister that was still active. I served a mission, worked in the temple. I was the Relief Society president, while also respecting my sister's decision to leave the LDS church. I didn't know it at the time, but she played a huge role in my deconstruction by breaking small beliefs and fears long ago that made it easier for me to walk away when I chose to. I have struggled with perfectionism and always having to be the kid that did everything right. My sister drank coffee and alcohol, got piercings, lived with her boyfriend, etc., and was still happy and successful in her life, contrary to LDS teachings. She was brave enough to step out of the mold, and every time she was okay, sometimes even better. I just wanted to say, you may not know it, but the work you're doing for yourself, your healing, may help your family later on. I never thought I'd be thanking my sister for being what I thought was a, quote, sinner. Her actions truly healed me in a lot of ways. She has been such a great support to me, especially as I've stepped away from the LDS church. That's so beautiful. And the reason I wanted to share that, thank you, because that person was very kind and encouraging. So thank you for that on a personal level, but also it's a lead by example thing, right? Which is a Mormon thing. So funny applying it over here on the other side. But I think that brings me comfort because that has always been my approach to ex-Mormonism, is just continuing to live my life and not having pressure to be perfect, but doing my best to be kind and to maintain my values of love and service and care. And knowing that example worked on this person from their own sister, I just think is really beautiful to hear. And I know there are a lot of you who are in mixed faith dynamics and it can feel really hard. So hopefully that's a helpful thing. It was helpful and hopeful for me to remember that the best thing we could do is just live our lives authentically and be kind in the process. So that's a nice little post-Mormon testimony to round off this week's Campfire Chat episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you're having a good holiday season so far. I'm hoping to do a more holiday-focused episode at some point this month. And we actually have a girls' camp episode on Christmas Day because Christmas is on Wednesday. So if anyone has any ideas what you want to talk about on Christmas, I'm guessing not many of you will be listening on actual Christmas, but maybe we could do something fun for Christmas Day on Girls Camp. Thanks for being here. Follow along on Girls Camp Podcast on Instagram, Haley Roll on TikTok, Girls Camp Podcast on YouTube, or if you want to join on the Patreon for bonus content for chatting and community building, go to patreon.com/girlscamp. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Love you. Bye.
GIRLSCAMP, it's Girls Camp.
This has been a 58 Ember production. For more shows, please visit the 58 Ember channel, 58ember.com, or find us at 58 Ember Media on socials.